What's that weird? Hello, everyone. It is Monday, the 14th of July, 2025, and I'm going to try to dis- discuss the differences between Zionism and Judaism. I'm going to go on a lot of tangents on that already. And so before I even start, I just wanted to explain just some things that I've talked about in previous videos, but because there are people online that are trying to correlate the Star of David or the Seal of Solomon or so many other different sacred geometric patterns with these six-pointed stars and the hexagram, even somewhat the T in the middle. They're classifying these as evil, and it's been connected with anti-Semitism, which I will reiterate, I am not an anti-Semite, and I'm going to prove that again today when I try to explain the differences between Zionism and Judaism and secular versus religious. I'm going to be unpacking a lot of things, and so before I even get into that, so you've got these triangles, these equilateral triangles that when they're connected, it shows the masculine, the feminine, the yin and yang, the duality of life, and also when you connect, there's six pointed stars or six, whatever you want to call it, leaves in the star, but there's 12 points in total. And so this to me is again sacred geometry. It's showing this divine clock that we live in, where these the luminaries above us, including the seven wandering stars, more of significance, but the sun and the moon being more important, the two great lights in the sky, one being a lesser light ruling over the night. But oh my goodness, I lost my train of thought. Okay, so the calendar system, and so it represents a biblical, cosmological, and astrological significance in so many different religions throughout time. And sorry, my partner came in, and but he was giving me something. So where was I going with that? So I'll show the sign just so I can unpack that more, and then I want to talk about Israel, even in the name itself. I think it's a beautiful name, but I will say that I have said this before, that it's taking from Canaanite, Egyptian, Sumerian ideological and philosophical frameworks. People are not classifying these as religions at the time, and some are saying that there's pagan religions as well, but also have that have these names within their what they were describing these beings or entities or divine beings as being. Oh my goodness, I'm all over the place here. It's just so hard to freaking explain out loud, but in my brain, it makes so much sense. But you've got Isis, so you got Israel, Isis, Ra, El. When you break it down, this is the Trinity as well. And so Isis, throughout Egyptian ideology, whatever you want to call it, it's a spirituality. It is the moon goddess. And I've been to Egypt. I spent almost a month there. It was very interesting, and I went all over the place. I went to the pyramids. I went to so many different places of significance, every one you could go to, including on donkeys and on catamarans and stuff like that. I went down the Nile, and so I have so many pictures of this because it fascinated me. So, anyways, you got the moon goddess Isis. That's the is in there, and then you got Ra, which was a sun god, and this was represented most often as a male figure, right? So Isis being the female, Ra being the male, and then you've got El, which was also in these more earlier religions, or where these frameworks were taken from. El was considered to be a god, like the overall god that even created Isis and Ra. And there's so many different ideological, philosophical, spiritual, and religious frameworks where there is significance portrayed regarding these sun and moon and creator god beings or entities. You've got Horus, because you've got Isis, Osiris, which was God, and then you've got Horus. Again, this is a sun and the travel path of the sky. Jesus with the 12 disciples. You've got within a myth, Zoroastrianism, and you've got Dionysus. You've got so many different figures that I can't even think of right now. Shiva, and anyways, already off the tangent. So Isis, Ra, El, Israel, and then you've got the 12 tribes of Jacob. What's the significance of Jacob? Jacob was renamed twice in the Bible as Israel. And so I believe that just essentially is talking about the sun, moon, and God, and that Israel encompasses all beings on earth, so all of humanity, and not just one specific religion. And so again, that just should be another reason why people should see the differences further on when I talk about this regarding Zionism versus Judaism, and one being more secular and one being religious. But again, there's more to it than that. And so, yeah, and so but there are people that I think are extremists or radicals that do believe, again, that present day Israel and present day Jews only, or people that follow Judaism only, are ones that are the chosen ones or the divine beings or superior. And so this is where that's also dangerous, right? So you've got, it is a form of radicalism, obviously. And when you think that you are superior to other races on earth, so the rest of humanity, and if you encompass such a small percentage, this is where people within that group, if they are believing that narrative from people that are not getting it out of the Bible or more ancient texts, they're getting it from people that I believe to be perverted in their ideologies, possibly by intention or for power and money, etc. But it is what it is. And so I don't think that any one religion is superior to the others, because I think that if you take from all of these different religions, I think they're saying the exact same creation story. So I see that. So I always said that these are different interpretations of the creation story, and some are more extreme than others. And I've said that within Islam, and again, that's a completely different topic. I'm saying there's a lot of incredible people that follow Islam, but I would argue that Sharia law, how it's being interpreted in some countries, sorry, my phone's distracting. It's very oppressive, for example, towards women and children and underage marriages, and there's just a lot to unpack there. Female circumcision, and having to be completely covered up, and in some countries where it has just one eye because they only need one eye to see. Like, this is just ridiculous. Anyway, so not compatible, obviously, with areas within the world, like the more developed, more Western countries, where the society was built based off of, I would say, like Christian ideologies that were codified into law, which is inherently how the Constitution was created, not recreated, but created to begin with, and our Charter of Rights and Freedoms in Canada talks about God very clearly in that, and our interpretation of God. And again, even in Christianity, it's expanded beyond religion to culture and various different languages, etc. And anyways, it is what it is. So I'm going to get into my conversation with Grok. Because this was coming on my feed. So this is why I think it's important. But this was on my feed. And so all over the place, people are sharing this. So is there an Israeli loyalty oath law in 26 U.S. states? I'm sure people have heard this. And I'm going to smoke a cigar, and I don't like doing it on camera, so I'm just going to go off for a second. But I will still be reading. Okay. So yes, claims have circulated, particularly on platforms like X, asserting that 26 U.S. states have laws requiring government employees or contractors to sign a loyalty oath to Israel, typically in the form of pledges not to engage in or support boycotts of Israel, often tied to the boycott, divestment, and sanctions BDS movement, not to be confused with the BDM movement. But anyway, these claims, as seen in posts from 2018 to 2025, again, I've just seen this in the last 24 hours, are partially accurate but oversimplify and exaggerate the nature of the legislation, often framing it as a direct loyalty oath to Israel, which is misleading based on available evidence, including web sources and X posts. I'll critically examine the existence, scope, and implications of these laws, addressing their alignment with the First Amendment and the establishment narrative. So what are these laws? Just give me a second. As of July 2025, at least 26 U.S. states have enacted laws or policies that require certain entities, primarily government contractors, and in some cases public employees or businesses seeking state contracts, to certify they do not engage in boycotts of Israel or Israeli settlements. And so they're saying public servants, and so how many dual citizens, how many are working within Senate or cabinet, etc. Again, these could possibly be conflicts of interest, but often as a condition for receiving contracts or funding. These are commonly referred to as anti-BDS laws, designed to counter the BDS movement, which advocates boycotts, divestments, and sanctions against Israel to protest its policies towards Palestinians, particularly in occupied territories. The laws do not explicitly require a loyalty oath to Israel in the sense of pledging allegiance to a foreign state, but they mandate certifications or pledges not to boycott Israel, which critics argue infringes on free speech by compelling a political stance. I think it goes beyond that, but I'll get to that. So web evidence: by 2018, 26 states had such laws, with 13 more considering them. States include Texas, Arkansas, Georgia, Illinois, and Ottawa, among others. So they claim that 26 to 37 states require employees or contractors to sign an Israel loyalty oath or face penalties, though these exaggerate the law's scope. So nature and scope of anti-BDS laws. Legislative detail. Texas enacted in 2017 House Bill 89 requires contractors to certify that they do not and will not boycott Israel during the contract term. It initially applied to individuals, but was amended after lawsuits to cover only companies with 10 plus employees and contracts over 100,000. Arkansas Act 710 from 2017 required contractors like the Arkansas Times to certify non-participation in Israel boycotts for state contracts, upheld by the 8th Circuit in 2021 as regulating commercial conduct, not speech. But I would say that actions, speak louder than words. So of course, if you can't talk words, you're going to go to anyway. So Georgia 2016 law was struck down in 2021 for violating free speech, but a 2022 law, House Bill 383, revived that requirement for contracts over $100,000 with companies of 5 plus employees. Illinois, first state to divest pension funds from companies boycotting Israel, 2015. Wow, I actually did not know that. Divest pension funds from companies boycotting Israel. And what is your classification of that? So requiring certification for state contracts. Iowa, HF, Hotel Foxtrot 2373, 2022, restricts contracts with companies boycotting Israel. Other states, as of 2021, 35 states had anti-BDS measures. Wow. Laws, executive orders, or resolutions with 27 explicitly targeting boycotts, including settlements. Provisions. More laws require a written certification that the contractor or entity does not boycott Israel or Israeli-controlled territories, example, West Bank settlements, and will not during the contract period. Some states, North Carolina, Ohio, Missouri, blacklist companies that boycott Israel, prohibiting state investment or contracts. Penalties include loss of contracts, funding or grants, not jail time or fines. Well, I mean, if they're hate speech laws, then that are being exploited, then they can get fined in jail time, despite some ex post claims. Legal challenges. Free speech concerns. The ACLU and others argue that laws violate the First Amendment by compelling speech and restricting political boycotts, protected under NAACP versus Claiborne Hardware, 1982. Federal courts in Texas, 2019, Arizona, Kansas, and Georgia, 2021, blocked enforcement, citing unconstitutional restriction of free speech, which I agree with. Counter arguments. Supporters, including pro-Israel groups like AIPAC, argue that laws regulate commercial conduct, not speech, and states can choose not to fund discriminatory practices. The 8th Circuit upheld Arkansas law, distinguishing boycotts as conduct, not protected speech. I don't agree with that. Supreme Court, 2023. The U.S. Supreme Court declined to review Arkansas's law. Okay, good. Leaving that 8th Circuit ruling intact, but not resolving the constitutional debate. That's very interesting. This is all lawyer stuff. Critical examination. Loyalty oath framing. Misleading terminology. I do agree with that. Ex post 2018-2025 called these laws Israeli loyalty oaths, implying a pledge of allegiance to a foreign state. But I'm going to get to how this is interesting. This exaggerates the laws which require certification against boycotting, not oaths of loyalty. The term echoes McCarthy-era loyalty oaths invoking First Amendment concerns. The reality, the law focused on economic conduct, boycotts, not ideological allegiance. Contractors can criticize Israel or support BDS privately without penalty, but cannot boycott Israel in state contracts. Okay, so this is the one that I was going to talk about. So critics, the ACLU argues these laws compel speech by forcing contractors to take pro-Israel stance, violating NAACP versus Claiborne Hardware, which protects political boycotts. Cases like Bahia Amawi's Texas 2018 and Abby Martin's Georgia 2021 highlight individuals losing their jobs or contracts for refusing to sign. So people did lose their jobs for refusing to sign. It's very interesting. Proponents, including Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, claim the laws protect state interests by avoiding contracts with companies discriminating against Israel, akin to anti-discrimination laws, which is so, anyways, the 8th Circuit ruling supports this, but the 5th Circuit's Texas ruling creates a legal split, unresolved tension. So some courts viewing boycotts as protected speech and others as regulable conduct. Okay, so we got the pro-lobby group. Chilling effect. Okay, so there are, though, a lot of restrictions. Okay, so then it goes into connection with to your context. Your question follows discussions about Mark Carney's investments and indigenous history, but the Israeli loyalty oath claim seems unrelated. Again, I didn't say anything about this. This is what I mean. Sometimes Grok goes into way older conversations that were specific to things like shares and stocks and companies, etc., and then throws it in here. So I don't even know why it's in there. Okay, so yes, at least 26 states have enacted anti-BDS laws. Thank you for staying on track. I mean, sometimes Grok is worse than me for going on all these freaking tangents. They do not boycott Israel, but up to 35 to 38 states out of 52 states and their territories, I'm interested in that as well, having such measures by 2025, so this year. These are not loyalty oaths to Israel, but certifications against boycotts, often for contracts over 100,000 with companies of 5+ employees. They've been challenged as First Amendment violations with mixed court rulings. Okay, so supporters claim they regulate commercial conduct. Ex posts exaggerate the laws as loyalty oaths or criminal penalties, which is misleading. So then I ask, why only Israel, not Canada, other countries? I'm an international security analyst, and I think Netanyahu is a criminal and is getting investigated in Israel, has for years. I've shared proof to my government that IDF and Mossad, people within these organizations, have committed war crimes, and I have, and crimes against humanity. Does that make me boycotted, despite the fact that I think Jewish people are not to blame for the actions of the few, just as in Christianity or Canada? I think Carney is a criminal, and I love my home country, for example. So your question raises several critical issues. Why anti-BDS laws in the US focus solely on Israel and not other countries like Canada? Whether these laws would lead to you being boycotted for your views as an international security analyst who believes Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is a criminal under investigation and that the Israeli Defense Force, IDF, and Mossad have committed war crimes and crimes against humanity, and how this aligns with your distinction that Jewish people are not to blame for the actions of a few, similar to your view of Mark Carney as a criminal without blaming all Canadians. I'll address this systematically and thoroughly, etc. So, why do anti-BDS laws in the US focus only on Israel and not other countries like Canada? Anti-BDS laws in at least, we'll say, 38 states with various measures by 2025 require government contracts or entities to certify. I'm just going to put myself back on screen now. See if I'm on. Hello. All right. No, I didn't want to show that. Show that later. So yeah, I look at memes that are very popular, and I like to unpack them in more depth, because I do believe that just by sharing it without context, it's again just fueling more anti-Jewish rhetoric, and I don't think that's helping anyone. And again, it's just further putting targets on people's friggin' backs and continuing these perpetual friggin' proxy wars that are benefiting no one but the elites. But anyway, so pro-Israel lobby influence. Okay, so anyways, I'll get to this first. These laws are unique to Israel and do not apply to boycotts of other countries like Canada, China, or Russia. Here's why. The pro-Israeli lobby influence, AIPAC, and Jewish federations. So AIPAC, again, control a lot. They have a lot of influence, I'm not going to lie, in the House of Representatives, the Cabinet, Senate, and get a lot of funding. The American Israel, I'm just giving you a context of them. This is not pro or against. That's a very neutral comment, I'm hoping. So the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, AIPAC, Israel Action Network, and local Jewish federations have lobbied extensively for anti-BDS laws, as revealed by the copy-paste legislate investigation. Israeli officials, including Netanyahu and Gilad Erdan, have directly supported these efforts, with Erdan praising states like Ohio for passing such laws. In 2016, Israel's UN ambassador Danny Danon claimed the government was advancing anti-BDS legislation internationally, and Netanyahu tweeted in 2020, "Whoever boycotts us will be boycotted." And he just nominated Trump for a peace prize. But anyway, contrast with other countries. No equivalent lobbying exists for Canada or other nations. Canada, as a close U.S. ally, before friggin' Trudeau and Carney, makes such laws unnecessary. Countries like China or Russia face sanctions or criticism, but boycotts are less organized and lack a coordinated advocacy group like APAC pushing for protective legislation. Geopolitical alignment. U.S.-Israeli special relationship. The U.S. provides Israel with $3.8 billion in annual military aid and strong diplomatic support, framing Israel as a key democratic ally in the Middle East. This special relationship is cited on X posts as a reason for unique protections. Anti-BDS laws align with this, protecting Israel's economy from boycotts like the BDS movements, which seeks to pressure Israel over Palestine rights. Canada and others. Canada, as a NATO ally with shared values, faces no comparable boycott threat. Other countries, example Russia sanctioned for Ukraine, are not protected because U.S. policy often proposes their actions and no domestic lobby pushes for similar laws. And so I think these tariffs, etc., these are essentially sanctions. But anyway, BDS movement focused on Israel. Palestinian-led BDS launched in 2005 by 170 Palestinian organizations. BDS targets Israel for its occupation, alleged apartheid, and denial of Palestinian refugee rights, modeled after South Africa's anti-apartheid movement. Its focus on Israel, not other nations, prompts specific legislative response. No equivalent movement targets Canada or most other countries with similar intensity. Perceived anti-Semitism. Proponents argue BDS singles out Israel, the only Jewish majority state, implying anti-Semitic intent as per the working definition of anti-Semitism. Notice the working definition, which cites double standards against Israel. Critics, including BDS supporters, argue this conflates anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism, as BDS targets Israel's policies, not Jewish identity, and boycotts not Israeli companies, example Microsoft, HP for complicity. U.S. states' autonomy. States like Texas, Arkansas, and Illinois passed anti-BDS laws to align with federal pro-Israeli policies. Example, House resolution condemning BDS in 2019. It was a 398 to 14 vote. So like pretty much everyone on the Republican and Democratic side voted for this. No state has passed laws protecting Canada or others. Okay, sure. So international contrast. Israel has its own anti-BDS laws, 2011-17, criminalizing boycotts, calls, and barring BDS supporters like U.S. Representatives Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar in 2019. Canada has no such laws. Okay, geopolitical strategy and cultural sensitivity to anti-Semitic accusations. Okay, so critics argue this creates an exceptionalism for Israel, shielding it from criticism other nations face. Example, Russia's sanctions for Ukraine. Posts note that lack of accountability for Israel compared to Russia, suggesting a double standard. And I absolutely agree with that. And that was one of my points here. And highlights Israel's prioritized states and U.S. policy, potentially at the expense of free speech. So would your views and actions lead to being boycotted under U.S. anti-BDS laws? As an international security analyst who believes Netanyahu is a criminal under investigation, has provided proof to your government of IDF and Mossad war crimes and crimes against humanity, and distinguishes Jewish people from the actions of Israel's government, similar to your view of Carney versus Canada, let's assess whether you'd face penalties under anti-BDS laws in the U.S. Okay, so your views and actions. So Netanyahu as a criminal. You believe Netanyahu is a criminal supported by his ongoing corruption trials in Israel since 2019. I thought it was 2017, and my BB Files video on Rumble removed. And so there is censorship on Rumble when you talk about specific people like Netanyahu. Okay, so for bribery, fraud, and breach of trust, and the International Criminal Court, ICC's arrest warrants issued November 21st, 2024 for war crimes and crimes against humanity, starvation as a method of warfare, murder, persecution in Gaza. These align with your analyst perspective, not necessarily BDS advocacy. IDF Mossad war crimes. You've shared proof with your government of IDF and Mossad war crimes consistent with ICC findings and reports from Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International, which label Israel's actions as apartheid and persecution. This suggests professional reporting, not public boycott calls. So, people, distinction from Jewish people. You've explicitly you explicitly state Jewish people are not to blame for Israel's actions, mirroring, wow, struggling, your view that Carney's alleged crimes don't indict all Canadians. This aligns with BDS's stance against anti-Semitism, focusing on institutional complicity. So U.S. anti-BDS laws applicability. So penalties include loss of contracts or funding, not criminal sanctions like jail. Okay. So require contractors to certify they do not boycott Israel or its settlements for state contracts, typically the big ones. So my situation, advocacy versus boycott. If you publicly call for boycotting Israel or companies complicit in its actions, example Microsoft, HP, Chevron for BDS targets, I'm saying like Raytheon, Lockheed Martin. I'm saying like the weapons companies that are being utilized and oil companies that are being utilized to commit war crimes and crimes against humanity. And you're a contractor in a state with anti-BDS laws. I am not. You could be denied for now, you could be denied contracts. So, for example, in Texas, Bahia Amawi lost her job in 2018 for refusing to sign an anti-BDS pledge. Analysis reports sharing proof of war crimes with your government as part of your professional role as an international security analyst is unlikely to trigger anti-BDS laws, as it's not a public boycott call or commercial action. These laws target economic boycotts, not private reports or opinions. But because I'm getting completely gaslit by the people that within government that I'm sharing this information to on a regular basis, I have no choice but to talk about this publicly. Unfortunately, free speech protections. Your belief that Netanyahu is a criminal and your distinction that Jewish people aren't to blame are protected speech under the First Amendment per NACP versus Claiborne Hardware 1982, which upholds political boycotts as protected expression. Courts in Texas, Arizona, and Georgia have struck down anti-BDS laws for violating free speech, though Arkansas's law was upheld. Risk. If you work for a company seeking state contracts and actively support BDS, example, refusing to do business with Israel, you could face contract denial in states like Texas or Illinois. Okay, so I'm unlikely to trigger penalties unless tied to boycott action. So not be boycotted. But I'm not getting any contracts. All right. Yeah, profiting from Ukrainian aid and all that stuff. All right. So we don't care too much about that because there's other things I want to talk about. Okay, so then I asked it, does the U.S. support war crimes then? Since they continue to fund Israel and these are the top leaders in Israel, and the top leaders in Israel are refusing to stop, does this not make the U.S. complicit in these crimes since they fund them? Because I'm saying, like, it's not, I'm saying within Israel, their leader, who is Netanyahu, and people within his organization at the highest levels, these people are guilty of crimes against humanity and war crimes and fraud and persecution, so many different things. And they're the leaders, like they're the top of the top, just like Justin Trudeau was the top of the top and Carney was the top of the top. And they're acting like dictators. And it's complete authoritarian ruling, and it's not stopping under them, right? And so unfortunately, like by defunding them, it's looking at it as a boycott on the country when it's not. It's specific to these people. I hope this makes sense. But anyway, your question raises critical and complex issues about U.S. foreign policy, its financial and military support for Israel, and whether this support implicates the U.S. in war crimes. And I'm saying the same thing for Ukraine as well, particularly given the International Criminal Courts, ICC, November 2024, arrest warrants against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant for war crimes and crimes against humanity in Gaza. You also referenced the U.S.'s refusal to halt funding to Israel, connecting this to your previous concerns about anti-BDS laws in 26 to 38 U.S. states, and your views as an international security analyst who believes Netanyahu is a criminal and that the IDF and Mossad have committed war crimes, while distinguishing Jewish people from Israel's actions. I'll address whether U.S. funding of Israel constitutes support for or complicity in war crimes using available evidence, including web and expo sources. Again, that's not really sources. While critically examining the establishment narrative. It's going to give the same context or whatever. Okay, so to assess whether the U.S. funding of Israel equates to supporting war crimes, we need to examine the nature of U.S. support, the ICC's allegations, and the legal and ethical implications. U.S. support for Israel, financial and military aid. The U.S. provides Israel with approximately $3.8 billion annually in military aid under a 2016 to 2026 Memorandum of Understanding, or a MOU, covering weapons, missile defense, i.e. Iron Dome, and training. Since 2023, following Hamas attacks, the U.S. approved, and again, even with that, U.S. approved an additional $14.3 billion in aid, including $10.6 billion for military support and $3.7 billion for humanitarian aid in Gaza. In 2000, and where'd that money go? To terrorist organizations, right? So there's terrorists within Hamas, and there's also terrorists that are Islamic radicals, and other organizations as well that are funded by things like these, like the aid we're providing and supplies, etc. And even Canada is complicit in that, is aware of it now, but has been complicit in it, and how they were funded for this attack, and the training conducted, etc. And the response to that. Take a look at my videos from the past. Okay. In 2024, just last year, the U.S. supplied $6.5 billion in arms, including 2,000-pound bombs and precision-guided munitions. Diplomatic support. The U.S. consistently vetoes UN Security Council resolutions critical of Israel, example ceasefire calls in 2023 and 24, and has opposed ICC jurisdiction over Israeli officials, with President Biden calling the 2024 warrants outrageous, which they are not, and Congress passing sanctions against the ICC in June 2024. So U.S. aid supports Israel's defense against threats. And so they're talking about groups that were created by the deep state, funded and supported and enabled by the deep state. And there's multiple different terrorists within these groups that transcend, like what they're trying to call these specific organizations or countries. Like, come on. Critics argue it enables military operations in Gaza, including actions the ICC labels as war crimes. So the ICC allegations, so this is from November 2024, ICC issued arrest warrants for Netanyahu and Gallant for war crimes and crimes against humanity in Gaza, including starvation as a method of warfare, deliberately blocking of humanitarian aid, leading to civilian suffering, murder and persecution, targeted civilians in Gaza, resulting in over 44,500 deaths by July 2025 per Gaza Health Ministry figures. So civilians, like those are considered to be crimes against humanity, and they are war crimes against the Geneva Convention. And so if Canadians were targeting civilians in Afghanistan, those would be considered crimes against humanity, war crimes. So like there's two ways you can tie this. Anyways. ICC findings align with reports from Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, and UN experts, which documents Israel's use of disproportionate force, collective punishment, and apartheid-like policies in Gaza and in the West Bank. For example, in July 2024, UN report accused Israel of genocide through starvation and indiscriminate bombing. Israeli investigations. Netanyahu has faced domestic corruption trials since 2019 for bribery, fraud, breach of trust, and quite frankly, a lot more should be on the table. But no Israeli court has prosecuted him for war crimes yet. The IDF, and look at why. The IDF and Mossad face allegations of extrajudicial killings and surveillance abuse. But Israel denies systemic war crimes. U.S. stance on ICC warrants. The U.S., not a party to the ICC, rejects the jurisdiction over Israel, a non-member state. Biden's outrageous remark in congressional sanctions, example HR 8282, June 2024, reflects this. And then again, I've talked about this in previous videos about continuing to use this right to self-defense. Well, so do Palestinians, Ukrainians, and Russians, etc., etc. Sure. But when you're funding, supporting, and enabling these proxy wars that are committing war crimes and crimes against humanity, like for financial profit, look at the connections with Hunter Biden as well. Anyway. Critics argue U.S. funding ignores evidence of war crimes, prioritizing geopolitical interests over accountability. So, for example, post-claim U.S. bombs were used in Gaza strikes killing civilians. Does funding equal support for war crimes? Legal perspective. International law. Under the Geneva Conventions and Rome Statute, knowingly providing material support, example weapons, to entities committing war crimes could constitute complicity, Article 25, Roman Statute. The ICC has not charged U.S. officials, but legal scholars argue U.S. arms transfers risk secondary liability, especially post-ICC warrants, and it's clear. So U.S. law, the Leahy Law, 1997, prohibits funding foreign forces committing gross human rights violations, but it's rarely applied to Israel due to political exemptions. The U.S. claims its aid complies with international law as Israel investigates alleged violations internally. Come on, this is what I mean. Ethical perspective. Sorry. Critics argue U.S. funding enables war crimes by supplying weapons and money and support used in Gaza and surveillance. The UN's 2024 genocide accusation, ICC warrants strengthen this view. All right. Does U.S. funding make it complicit in war crimes? Complicity implies knowingly contributing to illegal acts. Let's assess U.S. actions. Evidence of complicity. Arms transfers. Since October 2023, the U.S. supplied $17.9 billion in arms, including precision-guided munitions and 2,000-pound bombs used in Gaza strikes, killing civilians. And by the way, they've been giving arms and financial aid in various capacities for years now, like as everyone knows, right? So they're saying it started in 2023, but it goes much further back, and also used against multiple different civilians. Knowledge of violations, UN reports, Human Rights Watch, and Amnesty International documented Israel's disproportionate force and starvation policies by mid-2024, before the ICC warrants. U.S. continuation of aid post-warrants suggest awareness of allegations. Political support. U.S. vetoes of UN ceasefire resolution, December 2023, February 2024, and ICC sanctions shield Israel from accountability, potentially enabling further violation. Self-defense. Again, keeps on getting used, and these are by propaganda, psychological operation organizations from within U.S. and Canada and America. Did I say U.S., Canada, and in Israel, and in countless other Western countries throughout the world? It's propaganda being pushed from, oh my God, I forget the name of it, the Hasbara, and other organizations. And it's propaganda. I'm going to say that 5,000 times. Propaganda. Humanitarian aid, $3.7 billion in Gaza aid is cited as mitigating civilian harm, though delivery is hampered by Israeli blockades. And so the CIA has propaganda, psychological operations departments within Harvard and other like elite Ivy League schools throughout the world as well. And then Cambridge, same thing. If you want to talk about anyway. Legal analysis, Rome Statute, Article 25. Complicity includes aiding or abetting crimes with intent or knowledge. U.S. arms transfers could meet this threshold if proven to enable specific war crimes, but no ICC case targets the U.S. due to its non-membership. Precedent. No major arms supplier, example U.S. to Saudi Arabia and Yemen, has been prosecuted for complicity reflecting political barriers. So the Leahy Law could apply, but exemptions for Israel prevent enforcement. So, ex post, again, don't take it too seriously, but so NGOs, non-government organizations, argue U.S. weapons directly enable Gaza violations, citing 44,500 deaths in ICC warrants. The refusal to halt aid post-warrants strengthens complicity claims, as does AIPAC's influence on policy. Double standards. The U.S. sanctions Russia for Ukraine war crimes, but not Israel, despite similar ICC accusations suggesting geopolitical bias. It's just, I can't believe that they are pro exactly what's going on with what Ukraine. Anyways, they're opposed to what Russia is doing to Ukraine. I'm going to take that back, even though Ukraine is also complicit at the highest levels of lying lying about these events, these false flag events, most of them being false flag events that have targeted their own people or Polish people and innocent civilians, and blaming it on Russia to get NATO involved in a war, getting us involved into World War III. But in this case, they're not condemning Israel for doing the exact same thing. Like, it just like blows my friggin' mind, blows my mind. So yes, absolutely a double standard. Can't even believe it. Excuse me. And a large percentage of the people that are in Israel right now, this national area that I'm also saying deserves to be like its own country. I'm not saying to expand its borders at this point at all. I'm saying don't do that. Like, I'm saying stop infringing on Palestinian areas. You've got your own place, right? Like, and anyway, so the right to exist, obviously, and it's not my call anyways, but absolutely do. And they have, it's a lot of Europeans came in from like even like the early 1900s, and so before the Holocaust, for example, or just before the Holocaust. And but there's also from like multiple different African countries and other areas throughout the world, and so who are also coexisting in Israel. So I don't agree either when people are talking about pro-Palestine, like from the river to the sea or whatever. And this is from outdated charters from 1988, and it's been updated since 2017. And I'm going to get into that, where Palestine is not looking to overtake. Anyways, I'll get into that because I don't want to misquote anything here. I want people to get an unbiased view from the actual charter itself, and so you can do your own interpretation of it. Okay, so final answer. Does the U.S. support war crimes? The U.S. does not legally support war crimes. I don't agree with that, as no tribunal has charged it. Okay, that's fair. So start charging. And it claims aid is for Israel's defense. However, its $17.9 billion in arms since October 2023, continued post-ICC warrants for Netanyahu and Gallant, raises ethical concerns of enabling alleged war crimes, i.e. starvation, civilian deaths, as documented by the ICC and UN. Okay, so is U.S. complicit? The U.S. risks complicity by supplying weapons used in Gaza operations linked to war crimes, with knowledge of allegations via these reports. So legally no charges exist. Okay, so many consider Zionism to be separate from Judaism and think that Netanyahu is expanding Israel forcefully to get Gaza from other Semites, the Gazans, and has funded terrorists, not just within Hamas, which was democratically elected, but multiple terrorist groups or extreme radical Islamists in order to justify occupation and war crimes. So now I'm getting into the controversial stuff. Your statement raises complex and sensitive issues regarding the distinction between Zionism and Judaism, allegations that Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is expanding Israel's territory by forcibly taking Gaza from Palestinians, referred to as Gazans and Semites. I don't know if you call them Gazans or not, but anyway. And claims that Israel under Netanyahu has funded Hamas and other terrorist groups or radical Islamists to justify occupation and war crimes. These assertions connect to your prior questions about U.S. anti-BDS laws, U.S. funding of Israel, and again, it's Mark Honey's investments. Again, like, I haven't talked about him for friggin' days. What is this? Reflecting your perspective as an international security analyst who believes Netanyahu is a criminal and that the IDF and Mossad have committed, again, people from within that need to be investigated. So if there are people that are criminals in the Canadian military, they should individually be investigated as well, right? So it shouldn't be perceived as an umbrella statement, but I just want to keep on clarifying that. Have committed war crimes while distinguishing Jewish people from Israel's actions. I'll address each part of your statement using available evidence, etc., etc. Okay, so Zionism versus Judaism, a separate distinction. Okay, so Zionism defined. Zionism is a political and national movement. So it's political and national. It is not religious. It's right there. Okay, so if you are a Zionist already, to be clear, you are secular. Or at least your methodologies and actions and anyways are. So Zionism is a political and national movement. So it's a movement that it's not about religion. I'm just going to be clear again. People try to put it in there, but advocating for a Jewish homeland established in the late 19th century by Theodor Herzl and formalized as the first Zionist Congress, 1897. It led to the creation of Israel in 1948 as a Jewish state. There's more than that, because again, even the Rothschilds had a say with the Balfour Declaration that was signed in 1917. So Zionism is a primarily secular, though some religious strains, example religious Zionism, integrate Jewish theology. Again, they're trying to, and I'll get to that. Judaism defined. Judaism is a monotheistic religion and cultural identity practiced by Jewish people for over 3,000 years, encompassing religious, ethical, and communal traditions independent of political statehood. So, distinction. Many scholars, activists, and Jewish communities distinguish Zionism from Judaism. Zionism is a political ideology, while Judaism is a religious and cultural framework. Not all Jews are Zionists, and some non-Jews support Zionism, example, Christian Zionists. And I've said this since day one, there are actually more Christian Zionists than there are Jewish Zionists. And yes, it also has to do with the amount of Christians around the world. Sure, I'll give you that. All over the world, not just in Israel. So anti-Zionist Jewish groups, like Jewish Voice for Peace and Nature Karta, oppose Israel's policies or its existence as a Jewish state, arguing Zionism conflicts with Jewish values of justice or religious prohibitions against a secular state before the Messiah. For example, a 2024 Post notes Jewish protests against Zionism, citing its conflation with Judaism as a tactic to shield Israel from criticism. Very interesting. So this is people that are practicing Judaism around the world, not just these organizations. So they're wanting it to be separated from it, but they're getting lumped in the same group of people, which is putting more of a target on their back, just like this LGBTQ plus IA group. Yes, there are LGBT people, and yes, there are trans people that are, and again, it's a very small percentage of the population, and people like Blair White, and there are people that are exploiting this community that should be more protected, and for their own gain and access. Predators. Okay, so the BDS movement, which you referenced indirectly via anti-BDS laws, emphasizes this distinction, targeting Israel's policies, not Jewish identity, to avoid anti-Semitism accusations. Establishment narrative. Pro-Israel groups, example AIPAC, ADL, argue that anti-Zionism often veils anti-Semitism, as denying Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state can target Jewish self-determination, per the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism adopted by 35 countries, including the US. Critics counter this that conflate, I wonder if they meant 35 states, but maybe it could be 35 countries. Yeah, it's probably 35 countries. Anyways, critics counter that this conflates legitimate criticism of Israel with anti-Jewish sentiment, chilling free speech. So this is what people like Gabor Mate, Aaron Mate, Candace Owen, Jimmy Dore, countless others are talking about. These AIPAC and the ADL, they're literally saying that anyone that's anti-Zionism is an anti-Semitic, and it couldn't be further. I mean, it could be further from the truth, but it is absolutely incorrect. This is incorrect, and it's dangerous, and they're doing it intentionally. And people like Mark Levin from the Heritage Foundation, that's fully implementing Project Esther. Again, these are extremists, in my opinion, radical extremists that are promoting propaganda and psychological operations. And what it's doing is it's not helping people like the Jewish, Judaic community throughout the friggin' world that oppose this and want this to be separated. So I'm getting a little fired up. Am I still on? Oh yeah, I'm being recorded. I mean, I didn't know if you saw my face still or not. Continuing. Excuse me. Okay, so establishment narrative. Yeah, so AIPAC and ADL. So again, these, like, why are we funding these groups that are promoting extremism? And so this is where I'm saying the left and right. There's ways that we can address substantial red flags within both of these parties, which I've said before. It's a uni-party. And there's and a lot of taxpayers' money again is being stolen by these communities, and a lot of, and not even a lot of it going towards what it should be going towards, and some of it going to what they want it to go towards, which is war crimes and crimes against humanity. And they're working again with like major companies that even Mark Carney has shares in stocks in. Critical examination, your view aligns with the counter-narrative that Zionism is a political project not synonymous with Judaism. This is supported by Jewish anti-Zionist voices and scholars like Noam Chomsky, who argue Israel's actions, example occupation, deviate from Jewish ethical traditions. However, the establishment's conflation of anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism, as seen in U.S. anti-BDS laws, complicates public discourse, as you noted in your prior question. This is absolutely the case. And that's why I wanted to say as well that Palestinians are also Semites. And so it's ridiculous to say that if we're speaking out on crimes against humanity that are happening towards Palestinians and they're Semites, this is what I mean. It's again isolating a specific group and not understanding or addressing the fact that there's so many different Semites throughout the world. And it's, anyway, bonkers world. Your claim: Netanyahu is expanding Israel forcefully to take Gaza from other Gazans. Context of Gaza. Gaza is a 25-mile long strip along the Mediterranean, home to approximately 2 to 3 million Palestinians, controlled by Hamas since 2007 after winning 2006 elections. Like I was saying before, it's reaffirming it here. Israel withdrew settlers and troops in 2005, but maintains a blockade with Egypt, controlling air, sea, and most land access. Since October 7th, 2023, following Hamas attacks, again, I don't even like saying it because there were more organized terrorists involved, and it wasn't just from within that government organization, whatever you want to freaking call it. Okay, so Israel's military operations in Gaza have killed over 44,500 Palestinians, displaced 90% of the population. Can you imagine displacing 90% of the Canadian population? Look at that. 90% of the population, and caused widespread destruction per Gaza Health Ministry and UN reports, and countless other reports from people on the ground or communicating with people on the ground. The ICC issued arrest warrants. We've already talked about that. Actions like settlement expansion in the West Bank, not Gaza, and statements from far-right ministers. I've talked about Bezalel Smotrich and others within his current government right now. These are extremists. Call for voluntary emigration from Gaza, fuel speculation of territorial ambitions. So yeah, he's hiring people that are far-right extremists or far-right Zionists. Anyways, Zionists. The radicals. Again, there's a lot of Zionists that are great people, but the radical Zionists are the ones that I'm talking about here. The Hitler types, the Mao, the Stalin extremist types. Gaza Statute. Gaza is part of the occupied Palestinian territories under the international law, UN Resolution 242. Though Israel disputes this, claiming withdrawal in 2005 ended occupation. Critics argue the blockade constitutes effective control, and 2023 to 2025 operations suggest intent to weaken or depopulate Gaza per UN reports and a lot of other reports. Semite terminology. Your reference to Gazans as other Semites highlights their shared Semitic ancestry with Jews, both descendants from ancient Middle Eastern populations. And I would say the current people within Israel right now, again, a large percentage of them came from Europe, like Germany, Hungary, Poland, Ukraine, Russia, etc., and then some from Ethiopia and other countries throughout Africa as well, and the Middle East. This aligns with anti-Zionist arguments that Israel's actions against Palestinians are intra-ethnic, not just political, challenging narratives of Jewish exclusivity in the land. Counter-narrative. Posts and critics claim Netanyahu uses Gaza operations to maintain power amid corruption trials. I've said that. Ongoing since 2019 for bribery, fraud, and political instability. Example 2022, coalition collapse. Some allege expansionist motives, setting historical Zionist goals for greater Israel, including Gaza and the West Bank, though no public policy explicitly endorses it. Of course not. Establishment narrative. Israel and U.S. officials frame operations as defensive, denying territorial ambitions. The U.S. is $17.9 billion in arms since 2023. Less than 2 years. That's your taxpayers, Americans. support this, though critics argue it enables excessive force. Critical examination. While no direct evidence confirms Gaza annexation, the scale of destruction, example 70% of buildings damaged, and more now, and settlement rhetoric suggests a strategy to weaken Palestinian presence, aligning with your claim of forceful expansion. The ICC warrants and UN genocide accusations support concerns about disproportionate actions. Conclusion. Netanyahu's policies in Gaza, causing massive civilian harm, can be seen as forceful control, though annexation is unproven. Your Other Semites framing highlights the ethnic complexity supported by anti-Zionist critiques, but not official Israel policy. I see if they're going to talk about this. So you claim Netanyahu funded Hamas, which was democratically elected, and other terrorist groups or radical Islamists to justify occupation and war crimes. Analysis. Hamas's election and role. Hamas won the 2006 Palestinian legislative elections, 74 to 132 seats, 74 of 132 seats, deemed free by international observers, and took control of Gaza in 2007 after clashes with Fatah. It's designated a terrorist organization by the US, EU, and Israel. So they're only designated as a terrorist organization by these, and again the European Union. I'm saying that Canada should not be involved in that at all. I think that this is a corrupted organization, and so again, you've got Israel under Netanyahu, a war criminal, the U.S., who is heavily supported and pushing anti-BDS laws or certifications that are like making it impossible to address this. And again, just too many conflicts of interest. 3 countries, everyone else is like, nope, not a terrorist organization. People within that are, sure. Oh, I forgot. I'm still on camera. Sorry for lighting that. Inappropriate. I'm just getting freaking fired up with this. All right. Okay, and so this was what annoying to me too, and said US, EU, and Israel due to its attacks and charter calling for Israel's destruction. I'm like, that's interesting because since 2017, they've amended their charter and they're not calling for the destruction of Israel. What they want is a free Palestinian state to be recognized and the ability to be able to protect and defend themselves as well, i.e. have a system of government in place that's not getting targeted and being called a terrorist organization to begin with, having like law enforcement again to enforce their laws within their own friggin' country or state, whatever you want to call it, and a military, education systems, industry. And so I think because of the Levant Basin, and I've talked about that so friggin' much, like there's so much oil that can be monopolized, and this is billions, if not over trillions, over $1 trillion in money that can be acquired by oil that is technically owned, largely by Gaza, at least from the last I checked. And so conflicts of interest, oil, lithium in Iran, funding allegations, Qatar's role. Since 2012, Qatar has sent hundreds of millions annually to Gaza, including from friggin' Canada, our money, with Israel's approval to fund humanitarian needs, example, fuel salaries, and stabilize the region. Netanyahu confirmed in 2019 that he allowed these funds to prevent a humanitarian catastrophe and avoid wars, and that's bullshit. So critics, including Israeli officials like Ehud Olmert and Avigdor Lieberman, allege Netanyahu permitted Qatari funds to Hamas to keep Gaza weak and divided from the Fatah-led West Bank, undermining a unified Palestinian state. A 2018 statement attributed Netanyahu suggests he viewed Hamas funding as a way to buy quiet and prevent a two-state solution. No credible evidence confirms Israel directly funded other groups like Islamic Jihad or Al-Qaeda affiliates. Some ex-post claim Israel supports radical Islamists to destabilize rivals, example Syria, Iran, but these are speculative, cited unverified Mossad operations. Iran, not Israel, is documented as funding Hamas and Islamic Jihad. So again, we have put together where funds have been approved directly and indirectly to support terrorist activity within Gaza. But again, you're going to look at my other videos because there's just too much to go through, but that's incorrect. But of course, a lot of the media now is a lot of psyops. Justification for occupation war crimes. Critics argue Netanyahu uses Hamas attacks to justify military operations and settlement expansion, maintaining occupation. The ICC's 2024 warrant cites starvation and civilian targeting as war crimes, potentially enabled by Israel's blockade and operations, which some claim are justified. They're not. How can you justify war crimes and crimes against humanity, Mark Levin, and then condemn it when Russia's doing it? Right? This is what I mean. Like, the hypocrisy is fucking real. Sorry for swearing. Yeah, there's also cash transfers that are made. There's so many ways. Of course, they're going to deny it. Yeah. Zionism versus Judaism. Your distinction that Jewish people are not to blame for Israel's actions mirror anti-Zionist Jewish groups and BDS, aligning with your analyst perspective. This reduces anti-Semitism accusation as protected speech, as noted in your anti-BDS question. My U.S. complicity question. The U.S. anti-BDS laws in opposition to ICC warrants protect Israel, potentially implicating it in its complicity, as you argued. Yeah, so final answer. Okay, so it's designated a terrorist organization by the US, EU, and Israel due to its attacks and charter calling for Israel's destruction. Can you link the charter section, please? So this claim that Hamas is designated a terrorist organization by the US, EU, and Israel due to its attacks and its 1988 charter calling for Israel's destruction is accurate, but the charter's specific content and its context requires clarification. The original Hamas charter in 1988 explicitly called for the destruction of Israel, but a revised charter in 2017 moderated some language while maintaining a stance against Israel's existence as a Jewish state. Below, and again, it's exaggerating this. I'm going to get to it because the examples they're giving is why it's saying that. Again, it's a little bit it's not black and white, and it's open to interpretation from an unbiased lens. So below, I'll provide details of the relevant sections. It's been designated a terrorist organization by the U.S. From the U.S. Department designated Hamas a foreign terrorist group, the FTO, in 1997 under the Immigration and Nationality Act, citing its suicide bombings, rocket attacks, and other violent acts targeting Israeli civilians. They were doing the same thing. European Union. The EU listed Hamas military wing as a terrorist organization, so the Hamas's military wing, so they're being more specific. And the entire organization, in 2003, there you go, the entire organization, due to attacks like the 2002 Passover bombing. But again, they're not doing the same thing for Israel when it's doing the same thing in Palestine. All right, sorry, I'm getting so many freaking messages and emails. All right, go back on again. So I only have 5 unique chatters on my my Rumble as a content creator, and for some reason this month they added that the fact that I have to have 20 by the end of the month, or I won't be considered for the Rumble content creator program anymore. And so if people don't interact with me like on these live feeds either, then what's happening is as of the 1st of August, I will no longer be able to do the Rumble content creator program. And so will I continue on, or will I just finally give up? Because I've been at this literally for years. A lot of people that are being seen as like these huge influencers and truth seekers, etc., getting millions and millions of followers on so many different platforms and supported and funded and going on all these podcasts, and I have not been able to get to that level yet, and it's really frustrating. And so, do I just give up on this? Anyway. So Article 7 refers to a hadith predicting the killing of Jews by Muslims as a precursor to Judgment Day. So that's Article 7. Article 13 rejects peace negotiation. Okay, so the Day of Judgment will not come until Muslims fight the Jews. Again, this is 1988, not 2017. So I'm going to clarify that. Killing the Jews. When the Jew will hide behind stones and trees, the stones and trees will say, "Oh Muslims, oh Abdullah, there is a Jew behind me. Come and kill him." Again, this is disgusting. And like anyone that's spewing this or believing this, I would argue these are radical extremists. And So this is often cited as evidence of anti-Semitic intent. And again, it's not anti-Semitic. It's anti-Jewish, anti-Israel. Okay, so rejects peace negotiations and asserts that jihad is the only solution. And this is what I'm saying. Like, there's these radicals. It's not compatible with Judaism. It's not compatible with Christianity. We're seeing that a lot, and a lot more in countries that were predominantly Christian until recent history, and being exploited and being targeted and funding this through their tax dollars, and not even being able to afford families, but funding people that are having like with huge fertility rates. But anyways, I'm going all over the place here. But and I was saying this, just because I don't align with or agree with certain belief systems within a certain country does not mean that I am going to justify or promote or just like not speak out on the fact that they're committing war crimes and crimes against humanity. Because no matter where you are in the world, like if you're supporting this, like that's fucked up. Like it's just so messed up to me. Anyway, so 2017 revised charter. In May 2017, Hamas issued a new document of general principles and policies, often referred to as a revised charter, to moderate its image while maintaining core positions. This document is less explicitly anti-Semitic and clarifies some goals, but does not renounce the 1998 charter. Key points. So Article 16 affirmed the goal of liberating Palestine from the river to the sea, implying the replacement of Israel with a Palestinian state, but accepts a state on 1967 borders, West Bank, Gaza, East Jerusalem, as a transitional step without recognizing Israel. So Article 20 distinguishes between Zionism and Judaism, stating Hamas conflict is with the Zionist project, not Jews as a religious group. So I'm going to be clear. Even the like radicals and extremists within Hamas, they are saying the same thing. They are differentiating between Zionism and Judaism. So Hamas affirms that its conflicts is with the Zionist project, not with the Jews because of their religion. I already said that. Okay, so rejects peace agreements that cede Palestinian land, maintaining resistance as a right. I think that's correct. If you're going to say the same thing about Ukraine, you have to say the same thing in this situation. So that's the Hamas document of general principles and policies 2017. We can look through that. Okay, so the US, EU, and Israel label Hamas as a terrorist group due to its 1988 charter call for Israel's destruction and its history of attacks. Same thing can be said on the other side. Counter-narrative. Critics, including some ex-post and Palestinian advocates, argue the terrorist label oversimplifies Hamas's role as a resistance movement against occupation. The 2017 charter's distinction between Zionism and Judaism aligns with your view that Jewish people are not to blame, and Hamas's 2006 election victory lends its democratic legitimacy. Critics claim Israel's blockade and policies provoke Hamas's violence, and the terrorist label ignores the context. Okay, so funding allegations. Your prior claim that Netanyahu funded Hamas via Qatari money and not just through Qatar. 2012 to present is supported by Israeli approvals of over $1 billion in Qatari funds to Gaza to stabilize. They're saying it's to stabilize it as they're bombing it and killing civilians. And divide Palestinian Fatah versus Hamas per Haaretz and ex-post. This doesn't directly fund terrorism, but strengthens Hamas's governance, potentially justifying further Israeli actions, as you suggested. U.S. complicity. Your previous question about U.S. funding links to this, as U.S. arms supports Israel's operations against Hamas, which the ICC allege involve war crimes, starvation, civilian deaths. Labeling Hamas as a terrorist group justifies U.S. aid, but critics argue it ignores Israel's role in escalating the conflict. Your view that Zionism is separate from Judaism and that Jewish people are not to blame for Israel's actions aligns with the 2017 Hamas Charter's distinction in anti-Zionist Jewish groups like Jewish Voice for Peace. This supports your analyst perspective and avoids anti-BDS penalties unless you boycott Israel commercially. Netanyahu and war crimes. Your belief that Netanyahu funded Hamas to justify occupation and committed war crimes per ICC warrants is partially supported by Qatari funding approvals, but lacks evidence for broader terrorist group funding. Again, I've shared this in other videos. The 1988 Charter's call for Israel's destruction fuels Israel's narrative, which you argue Netanyahu exploits. Because I'm saying it was updated in 2017. There's been a distinction made, and yeah, and also recognizing Israel, but not in the territories that they want or think that they deserve. Okay, final answer. Okay. So I say, okay, so why are you bringing in charter sections for a charter that is not being used by Hamas? Where's the 2017 charter? You already gave it to me. I missed that in the first go around. Okay, so it's giving me relevant sanctions in here, not sanctions. Oh, sections. Okay, so the 2017 document of general principles and policies issued on May 1st, 2017 in Doha, Qatar, is a 42-article statement intended to update Hamas's image, moderate its rhetoric, and clarify its political positions without formally replacing the 1988 charter. It was released to appeal to a broader international audience while maintaining core resistance goals against, even here, it's being biased, Grok. Okay, so defines Palestinian boundaries, implying the replacement of Israel. So Palestine, which extends from River Jordan to the east of the Mediterranean in the west, and from Ras al Nakura in the north to el Rash in the south, is an integral territorial unit. It is the land and the home of the Palestinian people. Okay, so this from the river to the sea, not really saying that, but I mean it is clarifying geographic boundaries. Phrasing encompasses all of Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza, implying the elimination of Israel as a Jewish state in favor of a single Palestinian state. While not explicitly calling for destruction through violence, it rejects Israel's legitimacy as a state. So I'm going to verify. I'm going to have to go through the whole thing because it's going to dismiss multiple other articles within that charter. The 42 affirms the goal of liberating Palestine without recognizing Israel. So Hamas affirms that its conflict is with the Zionist project, not with the Jews because of their religion. Hamas does not wage a struggle against the Jews because they are Jewish, but wages a struggle against the Zionists who occupy Palestine. Yet it is the Zionists who constantly identify Judaism and the Jews with their own colonial projects and illegal entity. This distinguishes Zionism from Judaism, aligning with your view that Jewish people are not to blame. It just keeps on being redundant. However, it frames Israel, the Zionist project. So again, it's the Zionist project as an illegal entity, implicitly rejecting its existence. The call for liberation suggests replacing Israel with the Palestinian state. And there are, and again, I have never once said that there are not people within Hamas that are extremists and radicals, and these people should be jailed, and fired, obviously, especially if they're saying that. Netanyahu is saying that as well, and there's so many other people that are saying that, and it's being glorified, and it depends on, I guess, where your money comes from. For every group, terrorist organizations included in that, and so that to me would be crazy. But again, they're talking about Zionists, to be clear. Accepts a transitional state, but not Israel's legitimacy. So Hamas considers the establishment of a fully sovereign and independent Palestinian state, with Jerusalem as its capital along the lines of the 4th of June 1967. With the return of the refugees and the displaced to their homes from which they were expelled, to be a formula of national consensus. So they're saying that like the borders or regions it had as of the 4th of June 1967. So this was a couple of decades after the war. And so they are recognizing, correct me if I'm wrong, what these people within Israel had during that time. And because since then, they keep on expanding their borders, pushing more Palestinians out of their lands. And no one's doing anything about it, right? And so this to me is that they would recognize Israel in the state that it was at during this time. So please, again, correct me if I'm wrong. I'll look to see if there's any commenting. No one's commenting. People are probably asleep. This accepts a Palestinian state on 1967 borders, West Bank, Gaza, East Jerusalem, as a transitional step, but does not recognize Israel's right to exist alongside it. So again, this is to me is a very biased interpretation of that. The omission of recognition implies the long-term goal of replacing Israel with Palestinian state. It's saying like they're going to recognize Israel as per the 1967 land boundaries. So rejects agreements ceding Palestinian land. Why would they want to give more land up? Why would they want to keep doing that? As a Canadian, would I want the U.S. to keep doing that? And they're looking at having Alberta as like the 51st state now, not Canada. Like, come on. Okay, so Hamas rejects any international or Arab initiatives or agreements that involve recognition of the legitimacy of the Zionist entity or that cede any part of the land of Palestine. So again, the analysis is bullshit. So this is why you have to read the charters and interpret for yourself. And Zionism versus Judaism, your stance is a separate case, so it's still being redundant. So look at the Jewish Voice for Peace more. Look at the actual articles in the charter. All right. Okay, so anti-Zionists. I was asking for 3 prominent Jewish anti-Zionists, right? So you can't freaking claim I'm an anti-Semite or anti-Jew if I'm going to be promoting Jewish narratives. So anti-Zionists oppose the establishment or continuation of a Jewish state in Palestine, often citing ethical, political, or religious objections, while typically distinguishing Zionism from Judaism, as you do. Below are 3 notable figures, 1 historical and 2 contemporary, based on their influence and alignment with your views. My assessment. I don't like when it says views. So historical Rabbi Amram Blau from 1894 to 1974. So role leader of Neturei Karta, an ultra-Orthodox Jewish group opposing Zionism. Contribution Blau, a Jerusalem-based rabbi, rejected Zionism as a violation of Jewish religious law, arguing that a Jewish state should not exist before the Messiah's arrival. Okay, he led protests against Israel's formation in 1948, advocating nonviolent resistance and cooperation with Palestinians. His group viewed Zionism as a secular movement betraying Jewish values, aligning with your distinction between Zionism and Judaism. Impact. Neturei Karta's stance influenced anti-Zionist Jewish thought, though it remains a minority view. Blau's activism shaped contemporary anti-Zionist Jewish groups. It's not as much of a minority group as being pushed by propaganda media and politicians. So Neturei Karta's historical records in Jewish anti-Zionist literature. So you've got the YIVO Encyclopedia of Jews in Eastern Europe. Contemporary, you've got Norman Finkelstein, 1953 to present. American political scientist, author, and activist. So his contribution, Finkelstein critiques Zionism as a colonial project enabling Israel's occupation and alleged war crimes, notably in books like The Holocaust Industry from the year 2000 and Gaza, An Inquest into Its Martyrdom, 2018. He supports BDS movement and aligns with your view that Israel's actions, example Gaza operations, are criminal, distinguishing them from Jewish identity. His work draws on UN and NGO reports, echoing your claims about IDF Mossad war crimes. So impact. Finkelstein's scholarship influences anti-Zionist activism internationally, though he's controversial for alleged anti-Semitic undertones, which is bullshit, which he denies. Okay, so contemporary, you've got Ilan Pape, 1954 to present, Israeli historian and author. So Pape, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, in works like The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, 2006, argues Zionism led to the 1948 Nakba, displacing 750,000 Palestinians. He supports BDS and labels Israel's policies as apartheid, aligning with your views on war crimes and Gaza occupation. He distinguishes Zionism as a settler colonial ideology from Jewish culture. Impact. Pape's academic work shapes global, international, anti-Zionist narratives, particularly in Palestinian advocacy. His exile from Israel, now UK-based, underscores the controversy of his stance. So a bunch of talks that have been published, I'm sure, lectures. So Zionists advocate for a Jewish homeland in Israel, often supported supporting its policies or existence as a Jewish state. Like again, like many other people are acknowledging that and supporting that, having a homeland, but not at the expense of others, and keeping on infringing on the land in areas that you were put into in more recent past, only in the last 100 years. Herzl, an Australian journalist, asked for Zionist advocates for a Jewish homeland in Israel, often supporting its policies. So Zionist. So you've got Theodor Herzl, 1860 to 1904. He was the founder of modern political Zionism. Herzl, an Austrian journalist, authored, Der Judenstaat, 1896, proposing a Jewish state to escape European anti-Semitism. He convened the First Zionist Congress, 1897, establishing the World Zionist Organization. His vision led to Israel's creation in 1948, framing Zionism as a solution to Jewish persecution. And so in 1948, there was the Havara Accord. There were from even like the late 1800s, so the late 1900s, early 1900s, late 1800s. There were countless Jewish people from all over Europe and other countries like Africa that were already moving, and the Balfour Declaration discusses that even from 1917. But they were calling it Palestine at that time. Herzl's ideas are foundational to Israel's existence, influencing international Zionist movements. His secular approach contrasts with your views separating Zionism from Judaism. How does it contrast from my views? Oh, because there's no. So this is what I mean. I don't consider Zionists to be Jewish. I don't. And so when I'm saying it's secular and it's not a religious core or foundation, or it's So again, the bias here as well. His secular approach he's secular. That's how he's a Zionist. I think all Zionists, not all Zionists. I think the people that truly understand Zionism in theory and in practice, I believe that they are secular and do not believe in any form of God, because how could you? Like, I think your God is money. Benjamin Netanyahu, a Zionist. So again, friggin' Prime Minister of Israel. Alan Dershowitz, an American lawyer and author, very corrupt criminal, Zionist. So again, I don't consider these people Jewish at all, or like practicing Judaism. All right. So for financial top anti-Zionists, you've got Rabbi Amram Blau, Norman Finkelstein, and Pape, top Zionists, Theodor Herzl, Benjamin Netanyahu, Alan Dershowitz. Criminals, extremists, radicals, and just like Hitler was. I said what I said. How many? Oh my God, an hour and 22 minutes. Is there anything else I can say about that? Nope. So anyways, on that note, I will leave it at that, and I hope that everyone has a wonderful rest of your day.